So we don't really talk to each other. We just keep quoting back and forth to each other to see if we can form a coherent sentence.
But in case we actually have people listening that have, a brain and basic consciousness and decency, we're not going to do that to spare them. I was thinking in terms of leadership, you and I know or have known each other long enough and have been in the same spaces with the same leaders in a lot of, like, we know all the same leaders that we've had most of our lives, going all the way back in our history, which is into the olden times.
The before the 90s, the dark times in the 80s.
People may be wondering who this guy is that has, let's see, what do you got? A Star Wars shirt? You got
his Star Wars background. Yeah,
everything's Star Wars. Stan Cantrelle
is a theme night.
He's he's not that old. He's older than me, but we go way back. So we go back to the early mid 80s. And we do have this sort of connection that we've always had with pop culture. And we like the same stuff and we talk about the same movies and we go to see the same movies and all that. But we've also experienced leaders in a similar space. We've been under leadership. We've worked together under leadership. Stan was on my team when I was director of learning and development at Gold's Gym. We had a good run there before that little virus.
Yeah, before the COVID hit and affected not only the people of America, but the brain stems of the leadership at Gold's Gym.
I consider Stan to be an expert, if you will, as much as you can be an expert in the ways of pop culture, movies, TV, music, all those kind of things. And I thought he had a unique perspective because not only is he an expert in that realm, if you will, but he's also quite a skilled leader in and of himself. I've seen him in leadership roles before. I've seen him, the way he influences people, the way he talks, the way he carries himself as a leader in lots of situations that I've seen, professional in terms of, in quote, the real business world, but also in terms of in friendships and life and lots of environments. So I figured he'd be the person to go to on this. And so you should be honored by that, first of all. So
absolutely. Thank you very much. I feel very privileged to be here with you today.
What do you think the biggest misconception is? If I'm a person going into business or going into management or leadership for the first time, and I go, I want to be like in the movies, I want to give these inspirational speeches and I want to stand up and I want people to listen to me and do what I say and all this kind of thing. What do you think is the biggest misconception that people might get if they're using media as their sort of touchstone for what leadership is?
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of what we're already talking about to begin with. It's stylization. You're admiring style over substance, and I think there's some complexity there. I mean, real leaders kind of have to walk in this sort of almost contradictions. I mean, sometimes they have to compromise, they have to evolve, they make mistakes. You take someone like Steve Rogers, again, going back to Captain America, here's somebody who is very idealized. He comes from the greatest generation, but if you put that guy in a modern setting, there's probably some of his personal morals and ideals that would conflict with some of the people today. And a lot of leaders today have to find a way to balance that. It's because you don't want to offend people. You want to try and inspire people, and you got to find some sort of common ground to do that.
What do you think about the media portrayal, pop media portrayal of sort of the reluctant leader? I mean, throughout the history of media, from Frodo Baggins to, I don't know, Sarah Connor, all the way across the spectrum, that's always kind of regarded as the person who doesn't want to be the leader, they should be the leader, right? Speak to that a little bit. What is that kind of getting at?
That's a weird place because I think, you talked about that we have some history together. And I remember there were times in my life where I really thought that I kind of wanted to be a leader. It wasn't because I liked the idea of being in charge. But for me, it was probably a bit of ego. It was this bit of sense of that I felt like if I was leading, or if I was leading correctly, or if I was doing it right, then somehow that gave me a sense of meaning and purpose that helped define my personality. I don't know what else to call that. And as I've gotten older, sometimes maybe I'm not quite ready to jump on those bandwagons so much. I'm a lot more reluctant nowadays, probably because now I know the cost.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, maybe in a lot of these shows, either the heroes already know what the cost is and they're not willing to pay it. But then when they see that nobody else is willing to do it, then they jump out there. In terms of leadership, I'd say most of the time, and I could be wrong here, maybe you might have something to add to this. How do you feel? Do you think like most of the time people that are in leadership now are there because they want to be?
I don't know, most. It depends on if we're talking about. If we're talking about government and all that, then we're going down a whole path there. But I do like this idea of personal sacrifice as being essential to leadership. And I think that's why we connect so much with the sort of reluctant leader, is because we know, like you said, they're not getting into it to go lead an army or something. They're getting into it for a noble reason. They see a vacuum in leadership and they have to step in for whatever reason. And I think that resonates with us on a really deep level. I think it goes back to ancient humans and the way we saw leaders. The leader was the strong person, usually a man in the village, right? And they got the best weapons and they got the little nice hut and all that. But as soon as it came time to go and do battle with the village down the way, the expectation of that leader was not that they would hang out and chill. Their expectation was they would be the first one out of the gate, right? So it was intrinsic to have this great personal sacrifice. And that's what we've gotten away from. I will definitely say that, whether it's in business or government or religion, we've gotten away from this idea that it requires sacrifice. And it's not about.
And I think a lot of times people think leadership, well, I don't want to say dogmatically that this is the way everybody is. But there is a certain degree of that if you're going to lead, it really is a calling for self-sacrifice. And it is not so much a position in which to lord over other people. When we talk about pop culture leaders, they're usually kind of like lone saviors. Mm-hmm. They act outside the system. It's Batman or Maverick, Aberdeen. Yeah, or Katniss from, whereas in reality, leadership is deeply collaborative. It's bureaucratic and it's dependent upon the institutions that leader is installed into. So whether it's a business or a system of government, whatever industry, leadership, I mean, we know that leaderships can be anything from inspiring people as a manager in a McDonald's or a fast food restaurant, inspiring people in a Fortune 500 company, to trying to maybe inspire people in your homeowners association or at a church or a Sunday school or synagogue, whatever it may be. So and I think a lot of times what it seems to me, and again, this will probably definitely be speak a little bit dogmatically, a lot of times leaders aren't willing to show by example. It's more along the whole adage of like when we were kids, do what I say, not as I do. And there's something to be said about there has to be a little bit of more of a do as I say, as I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There should be. I think we've allowed, as a society, we've allowed our leaders to get by with way too much that would have never flown in. And I'm not one of those good old days types, but I'm just saying the original concept of leadership as humans invented it is largely different from how we see it now, where it is almost in most situations that you see, it's about personal gain. It's about lording it over people. Like you said, I like the concept of understanding that there is great personal sacrifice in it. And I like the reluctant leadership. I like what you said about being an example. What do you think about the idea that, or the truth of the idea that there's a lot of people in the public eye who are seen as leaders, but didn't get into, let's take like sports, right? You get that a lot. It used to be, if you're a sports hero, you're on the Wheaties box and you are an exemplary person, right? Like you said, you're an example. But over the years, same with music, right? If you're a musician, you need to be, the kids are looking up to you, right? They would always say that. And I've never really bought into that because I don't think they got into it to be leaders. I think they got into it for their love of sports,
Whatever
their
reason,
love of music. We made them into leaders, but they didn't want to be.
Well, I think what's that whole idea about the cult of personality? The fact that we, as as followers, whether it be fans or workers or volunteers or whatever it is, may have a tendency to idolize people to some unrealistic characterizations. I think sometimes in pop culture, there's more of an exaggeration of truth. We see Elvis kind of swagger and be overly dramatic, which causes quite a big ripple in society. Or someone like Bowie, who's all of a sudden he's an alien and a stranger. Or even the fact that Beyonce will kind of show off some more goddess-like imagery in some of her things. And the thing is, in the public looks into that and kind of writes their own narrative. One of the best examples I can think of, and this is to pull from a pop culture reference, an old one, is I love the movie Gladiator. It's one of my favorite films. There's a scene in the film where Caesar, it's at the very beginning of the film, Caesar's talking to his daughter, and they're having this little stroll along the side, and they're talking about what's going to happen with Rome once Caesar steps down, and the future of Rome and things like that. And during that course of the conversation, Caesar says to his daughter, he says, let's just, but for a moment, pretend that I'm a good father and you are my doting daughter. And she kind of smiles and hugs up to him. And she says, this is a pleasant sort of fiction. And that line has always stuck with me because I have found that a lot of interactions between people, whether they're willing to admit it or not, are pleasant sort of fictions. Social media is a perfect example of that. We set forth this idealized version of ourselves that people can kind of, buy into or not. Celebrities, it's the same thing. And some people know the sort of over exaggeration that pop culture will put on a person, and they'll use it very creatively. Yeah, it's just, I think there has to be this idea that we're willing to I think some of it may just involve something that you and I have talked about a lot, a bit of emotional intelligence, that sometimes, there are some people out there that can't seem to differentiate between a fictional leader versus a real one, and some of the nuances that it takes for a real leader to get things to happen.
I think the takeaway here might be it's okay to take certain aspects of people in the public eye and go, I want to have that style, or I want to be like that in that certain way, or I like them at their best as a leader, right? So I want to be a leader like Tony Stark or Steve Rogers or whoever, but also understanding that you're not seeing the whole picture, right? And that you need to have multiple influences in your life. It gets real weird when you try to stylize one person or idealize one person, be like, I want to be like, whoever. But it's so important. This makes me really kind of think that you need to have real people in your life that can speak into your life and guide you and mentor you, that are real people. And you can't depend on media to be that for you. You've got to have real people.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think pop culture is leadership. It's kind of part truth and it's part myth. Maybe it's just something as simple as, finding somebody with some wisdom that's maybe been down the road a little bit further than you have, and trying to, maybe pick up some of the positive, greatest hits of the lessons they've learned, so you don't have to make the same mistakes.
I want to end on a lighter note here. Okay. You got to pick 3 people to be your sort of leadership council in your life. And they're the ones you go to. You get three choices from any media you want. So movies, TV, video games, comics, music, sports. Pick one. You can't use historical figures. You can't use, we're going to leave religious figures out of it. Political figures, we'll leave all those out. So we're just talking pure pop. Pick your team of 3, your guiding voices in your life.
Okay. So yeah,
you can pick up the phone and call them.
Right. I didn't hear, this wasn't a question I heard before, so I actually have to think about this for a second. I'm a big fan of Bono in terms of being a musician who, I know he's accused of having a Messiah complex, but I also heard him once say, Yeah, but also I heard him say one time that he felt like fame was currency and that it had to be spent well.
Good.
And I feel like for him trying to make social changes in terms of things that have gone on in this country. I mean, he had the band and they worked together with other businesses to make I don't know if the company was called Red or the foundation was called Red, but they used a lot of money and influence to help people that were struggling with HIV. And I thought, man, that's awesome. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of Bono, whether you like his music or not. I grew up with it, so I love it a lot. If from a sort of, if I were to say comic books, man, yeah, probably Superman, maybe. I'm a big Superman fan. The new movie just came out recently. I'm a huge fan of that. And I heard somebody say recently something that really stuck with me. And not to be spoilerific, but the new movie does deal with some political implications of him helping out somebody that most people might say, we're debating whether or not he should have done it. And I heard somebody say recently that Superman is not the cops or the military. Superman is a firefighter. And I was like, whoa, that is awesome. Because that's exactly what he is. Firefighters don't care what your politics are. They don't care what your political party is. They just know, hey, there's somebody in danger and I need to go see if I can help rescue them. So yeah,
so you got Bono, you call Bono, you call Kal-El from Krypton.
Got that. Okay. So I got one more.
Yeah.
Let's see. That was one from music. We got one from comics. I guess if I have to say we're going to pull one from a movie, I think I might just even pull Maximus from Gladiator. I like that one. I like that this was a guy that all he wanted to do was go home. And there's a line in that film that another one stands out where he's talking to his second in command and he says, do you enjoy your duty? And the guy responds, he says, some days I do what I want to. The rest of the time I do what I have to. And I think that's sometimes what it means to be a leader is that some days you get to do what you want. But the rest of the time, you're doing what you have to do because the demands of the position mean that you can't always do what you want to do.
Yeah. And that takes us back to the beginning. I think that takes us to the heart of what leadership is, back to that idea of sacrifice. So thanks for being here, man. We'll do it again. We'll have another topic and bring you back. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Like, subscribe, do all the stuff. And we look forward to doing this again next time. Thanks.
Thank you.